In this video, I'm going to analyze the story of Cain and Abel from a political perspective. Before I dive into it, I would like to first of all share some thoughts and beliefs so that when I make this analysis, you'll be able to understand what I'm talking about. What is God? God is government. That is, God has the executive, which is the Father, the legislative, which is the Holy Spirit, and the judiciary, which is the Son. If you read the Bible carefully, the first comment in the Bible about earth is that it was formless and void. Formless in that verse, in a political term, is a place without political structure. And political structure refers to the way a government operates. That is like a system of government. Literally speaking, void means empty. But in Genesis chapter 1, earth was not empty because there was waters inside of it before God, the supreme government, came in. Void in Genesis chapter 1 simply means that there was nobody on earth to take responsibility for its operation. In other words, it means there was no government on earth. So God, the supreme government, had to come in to put it in place, which is what we refer to as order. To maintain the political structure of earth which God has put in place, God had to put Adam, the representative of God, the supreme government, and his deputy Eve to keep the earth alive, or to maintain the political structure that God has set up already. To back my point, before God cleared the earth due to the corruption of mankind in Genesis chapter 6, he had to look for someone who can suit him into his purpose, which is Noah, to keep him and his family alive with other animals just to maintain the political structure that has been set up already, right from Genesis chapter 1. Now let's go back to the story of Cain and Abel. I'm going to be analyzing each verses from 1 to 12. Genesis chapter 4 verse 1. And Adam knew his wife, and she conceived, and bare Cain, and said, I have gotten a man from the Lord. There is a quote that says that for a government to be legitimate, it has to take care of the need of its people. Like I said earlier, that God is government. And in verse 1 of Genesis chapter 4, the word Lord was used to refer to as God, the supreme government. Now let me explain the concept of Lord for you in politics. The word Lord was used 6,823 times in the Bible to refer to God, the supreme government. And the original definition of the word Lord is the keeper of bread. Bread is a word that is used throughout the Bible to describe food. And food in politics is resources. What are resources? Resources can be anything that can be used to foster growth and satisfy needs. Types of resources are natural resources, human resources, technological resources, financial resources, information resources, and so on. Now let's go back to the original definition of the word Lord. Lord means keeper of bread. Keeper is a very old word from the 1300s. It means to guard or keep watch over something. It's similar to a manager, but it's way beyond management. Anywhere Lord appears in the Bible, there are always resources attached to it. That is why it's always used interchangeably for God, which is the combination of the three departments: executive, legislative, and judiciary. That is Father, Spirit, and Son. I would love you to pay close attention to this so you can get it. Now let's go back to Genesis chapter 4 verse 1. And Adam knew his wife, and she conceived, and bare Cain, and said, I have gotten a man from the Lord. I said earlier on that for a government to be legitimate, it has to care for the needs of its own people. Don't forget, Lord means keeper of resources, and it also means one who has authority and power, which is the simple definition for government. Eve made a comment after she conceived her first child, I have gotten a man from the Lord. What is man? Man is a type of resources in politics, which is human resource. Politics is all about two things, of which I believe that we all want the same thing, which is power and resources. If I'm to insert the definitions I've used so far to replace the words of Eve, it will be this: I have gotten a human resource from the government or the keeper of resources, which is Lord. What made God a legitimate government in that verse is because he gave a human resource to Adam and Eve. And Eve showed appreciation to God, the government, by saying it. Genesis chapter 4 verse 2. And she bare his brother Abel, and Abel was a keeper of sheep, but Cain was a tiller of the ground. If you pay attention to that verse very well, what should come to your mind is, why did the Bible talk about the occupation of Cain and Abel? In politics, the words you use to communicate with people depends on their occupation and thought process. Cain was a tiller of ground and Abel was a keeper of sheep. Let me lay emphasis on that, then I will go back to language and politics. Cain was a tiller of ground not by choice but by the laws of ancient family politics. Adam's occupation was tiller of ground. This was the job God gave him as a means of livelihood to cater for his family. In Genesis chapter 3 verse 23, The Lord God sent him, Adam, forth from the Garden of Eden to till the ground. Cain, as the firstborn of the family, is responsible to take over the job of his father as a family business, and Abel chose to be a shepherd. Throughout the story of Cain and Abel, I'm going to be pointing out how and where God and Cain communicated using occupation and thought process. Genesis chapter 4, verse 30-4. And in the process of time, it came to pass that Cain brought of the fruit of the ground an offering unto the Lord. Verse 4. And Abel, he also brought of the firstlings of his flock and of the fat thereof. And the Lord had respect for Abel and to his offering. I will briefly love to make some comments on the concept of time. A Chinese political scientist once said that time is political in China. But I personally believe that time is not just political in China alone, but it's actually like that in every part of the world. A politician in the Bible once said, "For everything there is a season and a time for every matter under heaven." In the world today, every decision the government makes is always according to a specific time, and they always believe that it is perfect. In verse 3 and 4 of Genesis chapter 4, Cain brought fruit of the land to the Lord, and Abel brought flock. Flock refers to a group of animals like bird or sheep that has congregated together. In order to understand sacrifices and burnt offerings in relations to politics, you first of all need to get this very concept of language and communication in politics. If you want to lead a set of people, you need to understand what they understand, which is based on their occupation and thought process. Sacrifice in the Bible means to draw near. In other words, to have a close relationship with someone, not necessarily a deity. And burnt offerings in the Bible is a political symbol. A political symbol by definition can be any object, person, word, performance, or gesture that represents a political institution, hierarchy, movement, belief, or ideology. For instance, sheep represents loyalty and obedience, of which is very important in every aspect of politics. When sheep is used as burnt offering, it's a political symbol in communicating with God, the supreme government, that we as people will be loyal and obedient to your government's policies. If you read the Bible well, it's got to a point of time that God had to tell the people not to sacrifice any burnt offerings anymore, but rather they should listen and do according to his policies. Why did God say that? Because people's knowledge and understanding was already becoming broad beyond sacrificing animals, and beside that, people were missing the whole point of its political symbolism. I'm going to make another video on sacrifice and politics in the Bible, so please don't forget to subscribe to my channel, comment, and like this video. Genesis chapter 4 verse 5. But unto Cain and to his offerings he had no respect, and Cain was very wroth, and his countenance fell. Just as sheep symbolizes loyalty and obedience, fruit symbolizes abundance, pleasure, overindulgence, and temptation. The way I see it is this: what Cain and Abel sacrificed was passing a message of what both of them really want, and God only approved the one which is after the government's policy, but the other one was after his desire for pleasure and abundance. In other words, Abel wanted power and Cain wanted resources. That sentence in verse 5, "But unto Cain and to his offering he had no respect," means the supreme government didn't authorize it. When a government authorizes you as a person to do something, you become power, meaning that whatever you do as a person, according to the policies of the authority backing you, nothing can stop or hinder your power. And what is power? Power simply means influence. Cain as a person understood this. That is why he became wroth and his countenance fell. But in verse 6, the Lord said to Cain, "Why are you hungry, and why is your countenance fallen?" Verse 7, "If you had done according to my policies, will you not have been authorized? Sin lieth at the door, and unto thee shall be his desire, and thou shalt rule over him." What is sin? Sin in modern politics is anti-governmental activities, which is what we refer to as crime. Genesis chapter 4 verse 8. "And Cain talked with Abel his brother, and it came to pass, when they were in the field, that Cain rose up against Abel his brother and slew him." This scenario happens most of the time in our modern world. "I rather kill you, so none of us is going to have it." Verse 9, "And the Lord said unto Cain, Where is Abel thy brother? And he said, I know not. Am I my brother's keeper?" Don't forget, Lord means keeper of resources. And I said earlier on that I'm going to be pointing out how and where God and Cain communicated based on occupation and thought process. That question, "Where is Abel, your brother?" is a question of accountability. When a government stops hearing from someone that has been empowered or authorized, they go to their families to make inquiries to account for the whereabouts of that person Of course, God was aware of what happened to Abel, but God doesn't disregard protocols. After God made an inquiry about Abel from Cain, he replied, I don't know. Then he went ahead to use the concept of communication in politics, which is based on occupation and thought process. He said, am I my brother's keeper? Lord means keeper of resources. That is why Cain had to use that same concept to communicate with God. Verse 10. The Lord said, what have you done? Listen, your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground. That verse is a figure of speech talking about Abel writing a petition to the judiciary of the supreme government, which is the Son, seeking justice. Don't forget I said in politics you communicate with the person based on their occupation. Verse 11. Now you are under a curse and driven from the ground, which opened its mouth to receive your brother's blood from your hand. The word curse is the opposite of blessing, and blessing in politics means authorization. The style of judgment God, the supreme government, gave to Cain is like the opposite of what Cain wanted. Like I said earlier on, Cain sacrificed fruits, which symbolizes pleasure and abundance, of which in one sentence means resources. Verse 12. When you walk the ground, it will no longer yield its crops for you. That's the opposite of abundance. You will be a restless wanderer on the earth, and that's the opposite of pleasure. Verse 13. Cain said to the Lord, my punishment is more than I can bear. 14. Today you are driving me from the land, and I will be eating from your presence. I will be a restless wanderer on the earth, and whoever finds me will kill me. In verse 13, Cain appealed to the judiciary of the supreme government through the statement he made that the punishment is more than he can bear. Appeal is a legal term that means to ask an higher court to review the judgment of a lower court, but that's not the case here. For you to understand what I mean by appeal in verse 13, you need to pay attention to verse 14. He said, you are driving me out of the land, and I will be eating from your presence. God is a politician, and the presence of a politician in every environment symbolizes authority, power, progress, and hope. What Cain was saying in that verse is, since he's no longer going to be in the presence of the Lord, which symbolizes authority, power, progress, and hope, anybody can kill him without consequence, and is not going to get justice for it. And in verse 15, the Lord said to him, not so. Anyone who kills Cain will suffer vengeance 7 times over. Then the Lord put a mark on Cain, so that no one who found him will kill him. When you see the word mark or sign in the Bible, it means license, and license is a proof of authorization. What Cain wanted is justice if anybody kills him, but since he's no longer in the presence of the supreme government, God gave him a license so that if anybody wants to kill him, he would show them the license of justice that he won't die in vain. Verse 16, Cain went out from the Lord's presence and lived in the land of Nod, east of Eden. If you would like to see more of this video, subscribe to my channel, like this video, and tell me what to think in the comment section. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.